With Inauguration Day closing in, Donald Trump is trying to change the conversation away from the cloud of questions hanging over his looming presidency.
We'll talk about that on Wednesday.
Asked by reporters about Russia's attempts to meddle in the election, Trump punted to his news conference Wednesday.
Who do you trust more, though, Julian Assange or the NSA or whatever?
We'll be talking to you very soon.
A key question for Trump is just how much he buys into the U.S. intelligence community's report that concludes Russia directed hackers to tilt the election his way. Top transition advisors aren't offering much clarity, indicating Trump believes some of the findings.
He's not denying that entities in Russia were behind this particular hacking campaign,
but suggesting it doesn't really matter.
There's no smoking gun when it comes to the nexus between these hacking activities and the election results.
Over the weekend, Trump tweeted, "Having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. Only stupid people or fools would think that is bad." Part of a softer tone on Moscow that worries Republicans.
If after having been briefed by our intelligence leaders, Donald Trump is still unsure as to what the Russians did, that would be incredibly unnerving to me because the evidence is overwhelming.
Trump is creating even more questions, with transition sources confirming to CNN that his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will serve as a senior advisor to the president. Critics wonder how Trump will hand his businesses off to his sons, while other relatives like Kushner are working in the White House. Not to worry, says Trump.
Yeah, we'll talk about it on Wednesday. It's very simple. All I can say is it's very simple, very easy.
Adding to the pre-inaugural drama, hearings for a slew of Trump's cabinet picks are getting underway, and Democrats are howling over delays in background materials coming into the committees.
This is a parade of people who are really not your normal nominees, and we need that information to hold a responsible hearing.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell insisted there will be no holdup.
Everybody will be properly vetted, as they have been in the past, and I'm hopeful that we'll get up to 6 or 7, a particular national security team in place on day one.
One name sure to generate heat is Trump's selection for Attorney General, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions. Gold Star parent Kazir Khan sent a letter to the Senate.
"I am not a racist,"
reminding lawmakers of Sessions' past battles with civil rights groups. 30 years ago, a bipartisan group of senators rejected Mr. Sessions' nomination to be a federal judge. His record since then does not give us any reason to believe that those senators were in error. Trump is standing by Sessions.
No, I think he's going to do great. High-quality man.
We still don't know what data is held and relied on when it comes to unfounded accusations. We continue to strongly reject any involvement of Moscow and accusations that Russian officials or institutions were involved in hacking attacks. We are observing a serious fatigue with these accusations. It's reminiscent of a witch hunt.
The response is the first of its nature by the Kremlin following the publication of a report earlier this month by the U.S. intelligence community assessing Russian activity in the November election. The report tied Russian President Vladimir Putin to election meddling and said Moscow intended to secure Donald Trump's victory. On Sunday, Trump's representatives said the president-elect has accepted the conclusion that Russia was behind the cyber attacks. But he said the alleged hacking activity had no impact on the results of the election, while avoiding a direct acknowledgement of Moscow's responsibility.
We're now getting word, you can update our viewers, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump's husband, he will become a senior advisor in the White House to the president. Is that right?
That's right. You know, that's something that we've been long expecting. Of course, Kushner has been a top advisor to Donald Trump throughout this election cycle. He played a large role in getting Donald Trump elected, really getting into the nitty-gritty in these states that really meant the difference for Donald Trump, looking at the numbers in Michigan and also Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Of course, there's been questions about some of the conflicts of interest or the nepotism, anti-nepotism laws. And of course, we know that Jared Kushner has been working with Wilmer Hale, the law firm, to see how he can get around some of those concerns. But of course, we know now that not being a big concern. They say Jared Kushner's lawyers saying that those anti-nepotism laws only apply at agencies and not within the White House itself. So Jared Kushner, we know he and Ivanka have secured that house down in D.C., and now Jared Kushner will be in the White House continuing to advise his father-in-law, the president-elect Donald Trump.
Welcome back. Some very big questions for the president-elect this week. How he plans, for example, to separate from his business and avoid big conflicts. That's one question. His 100-day legislative agenda? Well, that's another one. But when Trump meets with reporters on Wednesday in New York, don't be surprised if this comes up too.
But there was one performance this year that stunned me. It was that moment when the person asking to sit in the most respected seat in our country imitated a disabled reporter, someone he outranked in privilege, power, and the capacity to fight back. Disrespect invites disrespect. Violence incites violence. When the powerful use their position to bully others, we all lose.
As you might expect, Donald Trump did not wait very long to respond. Early this morning on Twitter, he tweets, quote, Meryl Streep, one of the most overrated actresses in Hollywood, doesn't know me but attacked last night at the Golden Globes. She is a Hillary flunky who lost big. For the 100th time, I never mocked a disabled reporter. Would never do that, but simply showed him groveling when he totally changed a 16-year-old story that he had written in order to make me look bad. Just more very dishonest media. We could come at this a number of ways. Number one, he could have let this go. Number two, he could have said, oh, such a shame, I'm a big fan. But let me come to this point. If you're Donald Trump, you're firing back. We can get into his response in a minute. But to be in a fight with what he believes to be liberal Hollywood elitists, not a bad thing for him in terms of keeping in touch with his supporters.
Absolutely, it's not a bad thing. The conservative base loves this. They view Hollywood as out of touch, elitist. You saw a lot of people rallying to his defense on the right side of the aisle. But it's so interesting how quickly he responded. Not only did he tweet this morning, last night he called one of Julie's colleagues and to push back on the phone so it would get into the press almost immediately. So much of it is a question of how much of it is him not having a very thick skin, or how much of it is him wanting to distract from the discussion about the agenda going forward, his conflicts of interest, Russia, you name it. His strategy, sometimes, is there even a strategy? It's him just going his gut reaction to respond to a lot of these things. I think that's going to be so fascinating going forward and when he assumes
I think it's more to me, and please correct me if you disagree or jump in, it's more to me, to your point, calling the New York Times, so let's talk about this, is a sort of a New York City street brawler.
Well, and it speaks to this narrative of he wants to come in as the underdog. They're all insulting me. They're all, disrespecting me and not taking me seriously. And it's ironic, obviously, because this is a man who's been in the Hollywood mix for many, many years himself. But it's true that his supporters do view Hollywood as a net negative. They view Hollywood as elitist liberals, and in fact, much of Hollywood did support Hillary Clinton in the campaign. So it's not a misplaced attempt. But again, I think it's more about creating this narrative of being in this defensive crouch, and he's hitting back at his critics even before he takes office.
But doesn't Donald Trump want to be accepted by these people? I think there is a part of him because he was at the same award shows as them not too long ago.
Wasn't he a liberal Hollywood elitist?
Exactly.
Like a couple of years ago.
That's the thing, and I think that's why to Sarah's point, he goes and stands in front of cameras with Kanye West. He likes being surrounded by famous people. So I think there is, and not to put him on the couch or something, but I think there is a little bit of resentment there that these people will not accept him. They've never accepted him, and now he's got the power to shine them on Twitter.
And it is impossible to go back and look at the video, if you looked at it at the time, of him talking about your colleague and not think he's mocking a disabled person.
Absolutely.
Now,
if you've ever seen him.
Yeah, if you've ever seen him and if you've ever seen what Mr. Trump did there, and maybe we should give him the benefit of the doubt, but he tweets all the time. He calls people stupid. He calls people clowns. And so he's sort of lost the benefit of the doubt in the way he handles people. But this morning, Kellyanne Conway, who was his campaign manager, she will be his counselor in the White House, was asked on CNN and on Fox News about this moment, especially about the campaign moment. How could you say he wasn't mocking him? And listen to this.
You can't give him the benefit of the doubt on this, and he's telling you what was in his heart. You always want to go by what's come out of his mouth rather than look at what's in his heart. I'm concerned that somebody with a platform like Meryl Streep is also, I think, inciting people's worst instincts.
Let's take these in reverse order. I'm concerned that somebody with a platform like Meryl Streep is inciting people's worst instincts. Hello. Donald Trump has a platform, and a lot of people say he incited people's worst instincts with some of the things he said during the campaign, including, in the old days we just slap him or get him out of here or things like that. And then here's one for world leaders. Listen closely to the future counselor to the President of the United States if you're a world leader. You can't give him the benefit of doubt on this, and he's telling you what was in his heart. You want to go on what's come out of his mouth rather than what's in his heart. Is she telling us not to believe what he says?
I think this goes back to what they said about him during the campaign, that his supporters took him seriously but not literally, and everyone else took him literally but not seriously. In some ways, what she's saying is you really can't just go on his words. You can't go on what he says. You can't watch a clip of him on the campaign trail and hold him to that. You have to really think about, what is he really trying to say? What does he believe? And that's impossible, and particularly for somebody who talks about the dishonest media and we can't be trusted and no reporters can ever be trusted to sort of interpret any of this or give it any context. Would he really want us to be trying to look into his heart?
And the other thing is, we have literally seen Donald Trump do impressions of a number of people throughout his time on the campaign trail. He has done an impression of me. I think it was actually the same day as he was impersonating a New York Times reporter. He did an impression of Ben Carson and his belt buckle. He did impressions repeatedly throughout the campaign. So this isn't an issue of giving him the benefit of the doubt. It's an issue of not just seeing what he was saying, but seeing what he was doing with our own eyes. And yes, we know that politicians say one thing and do another. This was what Donald Trump was not supposed to do as an outside-the-box candidate. But this is a different situation there. You're seeing it, you're hearing it. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of ambiguity there.
And the question is, though, that's the point President Obama was trying to make in the clip we played earlier, that there's a difference coming from the campaign to the government. When you're president and you do things like that, you can move markets or you can change geopolitical relationships. So we'll see. We'll see. We have 11 days until the swearing in at the beautiful Capitol steps right behind us. Everybody sit tight. Up next, been there, tried that. More parting advice from President Obama, who, listen in just a moment, doesn't think much of President-elect Trump's affection for Vladimir Putin.
Quick question, Emma, please. Right here,
You know, my favorite part is just like that we get to keep the conversation going about the movie we made.
I like the opportunity to be amongst people that I admire. That's, it's not necessarily the carpet, it's what's inside.
Seeing people like John Lithgow and this is incredible. I mean, these people, these actors that I've admired for years and years and years.
Things like bumping into Jeffrey, who I haven't seen in a year and a half or 2 years. Award season is a time when that happens, and it doesn't really have much to do with competition. It's really about, a sort of a shared celebration.
Just being amongst people that are like-minded and really great artists. It's probably my favorite thing.
I think it's who you bring as your date. Like for me, today I brought my mum, and she's just so excited to be here and so proud of me, and so it just makes the whole day just so special.
The shoes?
I wish hair and makeup could be speeded up a little. I'd love to just have a wand waved and you're done in 5 minutes.
Being yelled at. Being yelled at on the carpet. Over the shoulder.
I can't wear heels because I just I can't function if I'm in pain.
If I'm being honest, least favorite part is that I'm in a little bit of pain right now. Let's be real. All of us are in a little, 50% of us are in a little bit of pain right now.
We're now getting word, you can update our viewers, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump's husband, he will become a senior advisor in the White House to the president. Is that right?
That's right. That's something that we've been long expecting. Of course, Kushner has been a top advisor to Donald Trump throughout this election cycle. He played a large role in getting Donald Trump elected, really getting into the nitty-gritty in these states that really meant the difference for Donald Trump, looking at the numbers in Michigan and also Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Of course, there's been questions about some of the conflicts of interest or the nepotism, anti-nepotism laws. And of course, we know that Jared Kushner has been working with Wilmer Hale, the law firm, to see how he can get around some of those concerns. But of course, we know now that not being a big concern. They say Jared Kushner's lawyers saying that those anti-nepotism laws only apply at agencies and not within the White House itself. So Jared Kushner, we know he and Ivanka have secured that house down in D.C., and now Jared Kushner will be in the White House continuing to advise his father-in-law, the president-elect Donald Trump.
A U.S. Navy ship fired warning shots after a confrontation with Iran. U.S. officials say on Sunday Iranian vessels approached a U.S. ship several times at high rates of speed near the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, let's get the details of what happened. CNN Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr joins us right now. Barbara, what do you know?
Good morning. The U.S. Navy is offering few details, but is saying there were about half a dozen encounters with 5 or 6 Iranian boats Sunday as 3 Navy ships were entering the Strait of Hormuz, going up into the Persian Gulf. Not unusual for the Iranians to shadow the U.S. Navy, but this time it all lasted some 9 hours, and at one point, 4 of the Iranian boats came so close, so fast to the USS Mahan, a U.S. Navy destroyer, that the Mahan issued several warnings and then fired warning shots to make the Iranians back off, and indeed they did. But before it was all over, a helicopter dropped smoke grenades into the water. The Iranians on their side flew a UAV, an unmanned drone, near the U.S. Navy. A long period of harassment over a 9-hour period. Nobody hurt, no injuries, but it just really underscores the level of tension on the high seas, especially when they encounter the Iranians.
তাদের মাধ্যমে যাচ্ছে কাজকাম করি সুস্থভাবে যখন আমার সম্পূর্ণ সুস্থ হয় তখনই আমার প্রথম হবে যাচ্ছে আমার একটা শিশু বাচ্চা আছে
Today, Steve Jobs went on stage to unveil the iPhone.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone.
In hindsight, we know what a big moment that was, but at the time, not everyone thought that the iPhone would be a success. Our tech columnist John Dvorak said that Apple should pull the plug on the iPhone. A senior executive at BlackBerry said it wasn't secure, it had battery drain, and a lousy keyboard. And Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer said, quote, there is no chance the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. Now, tech pundit Malik was at the launch and said the possibilities offered by the iPhone were obvious.
When I used the iPhone for the first time, like when I saw it, and I said, wow, my computer is no longer, shackled to my desk anymore. I can be anywhere and I can be truly free, more free than actually a phone was. I think the speed with which things happened is definitely being a bit of a surprise, not what we can do with it. Because it's essentially, was miniaturization of a computer and putting it into our pocket.
A computer in your pocket. Now, the iPhone, it wasn't the first smartphone, but it paved the way for our modern, digital-driven life. Just think about the many services we use today that rely on a smartphone, like Uber, Snapchat, Instagram. Enormous businesses today that only exist because of this. But the power of the smartphone goes well beyond that. Billions of people around the world now have a device like this, which means they could reach out and touch anyone else from almost anywhere on the planet. And it means that they can instantly access the sum of humanity's knowledge from a device that, again, fits in your pocket. Malik says there is still much more to come.
I don't think we are done with it yet. It may be the easy part of the phone revolution might be over, but it is still going to be a key part of our, future lives, especially as we have more and more connected devices and more, wearables and cars which are connected. The phone becomes even more integral. Essentially, just what PC was, 15 years ago, the phone is, at that point in our life right now.
And a final word. Everything you've seen in this segment, barring that clip of Steve Jobs, was recorded with an iPhone. In fact, this behind-the-scenes look at an iPhone was recorded on another iPhone. That's all for Newsstream. I'm Christy Lou-Stout. World Sport is next.
I looked at my email, then I got the shock of my life. I felt like Muhammad Ali had hit me in the stomach.
What did that email say?
Basically, they have found another announcer, and that, Charlie, you're a legend and you're wonderful, and all kinds of great lines that I wish I could use them myself sometime. But basically, this gentleman that you see is really good, and but I was disappointed because I thought I would be the announcer. And then when I read the email, I thought I was going to commit suicide. It was really terrible. I know that I've been doing it for 60 years, and no one has ever asked whether I'm a Democrat, Republican, Independent. So it's just the ability of the individual announcer. I have been the only announcer that's ever, again, announced the inaugural parade. And so I was taken back a little bit, thinking, gee, how did they get another person?
Donald Trump and the Republican-controlled Congress moving full speed ahead with an ambitious agenda. Confirmation hearings begin tomorrow for some of the president-elect's key cabinet nominees, while the Senate is expected to hold a series of votes this week to begin repealing Obamacare, but details of replacing the outgoing president's signature law still remain unclear.
It may take time to get all the elements of the replace in place.
Trump will also finally answer questions on Wednesday when he holds his first press conference in nearly 6 months. The now declassified intelligence report on Russian hacks expected to be a major focus, but questions remain about whether Trump accepts the report's conclusions.
He's not denying that entities in Russia were behind this particular hacking campaign.
Hillary Clinton was viewed by a majority of Americans as unlikable. That has nothing to do with Moscow.
Over the weekend, Trump tweeting, having a good relationship with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing. Only stupid people or fools would think that it is bad. When I am president, Russia will respect us far more than they do now. And both countries will perhaps work together to solve some of the many great and pressing problems and issues of the world. For months, Trump has cast doubts about U.S. intelligence that Russia was trying to interfere with the election.
It could be somebody else. Maybe there is no hacking. Could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds.
Trump's skepticism dividing his own party.
If after having been briefed by our intelligence leaders, Donald Trump is still unsure as to what the Russians did, that would be incredibly unnerving to me because the evidence is overwhelming.
In a new interview, President Obama says he did not downplay the threat Vladimir Putin posed to the United States.
I don't think I underestimated him. Vladimir Putin's not on our team. If we get to a point where people in this country feel more affinity with a leader who is an adversary and views the United States and our way of life as a threat to him, then we're going to have bigger problems than just cyber hacking.
So you're calling for a bipartisan, independent commission to investigate foreign interference in the election. Now, the intelligence community put out its report, as you know, which concluded Moscow was behind the interference and favored Trump. Why the need for a bipartisan commission? Why can't this just be handled by the Senate Intelligence Committee or the Senate Foreign Relations Committee?
Well, I think you want to have both things happening. Of course, you want the Intelligence Committee. Armed Services, Senator McCain just led a strong hearing. I think the Judiciary Subcommittee that Lindsey Graham's been involved in, we would like to do something there. You're going to have those hearings, but when you look back through history, say the 9/11 Commission, you had a group of people that were devoted to working on something, not just looking at what happened in the past, which is important, but using the past to make recommendations for the future. This wouldn't be a bunch of politicians recommendations, Jake. These would be experts that would be appointed by Democrats and Republicans to be able to make recommendations going forward as well as looking at what happened. Based on my trip with Senator McCain and Lindsey Graham to the Baltics and Ukraine and Georgia, the people out there, they've seen this movie before. There have been attempts all over the world where Russia has tried to influence democracies and make changes, so it is no surprise that our 17 intelligence agencies came to the same conclusion.
We close every day by asking our reporters to share a little bit from their notebooks, get you out ahead of the big political news just around the corner. Manu?
John, Republicans in Congress have mostly fallen in line behind Donald Trump since he was elected president. But there's one faction that is creating some problems, and probably problems are starting to come. Those are the libertarian-minded members of the House and Senate Republican conferences. People like Justin Amash of Michigan, who have criticized Trump for some of the deals that he believes are picking winners and losers in the economy, like that carrier deal that he announced late last year. But even Republican Rand Paul creating problems for the Senate Republican leadership, saying that he's going to vote against the pending budget that would pave the way to repeal Obamacare because it would increase his deficit spending, and Paul himself talking to Donald Trump, trying to convince him to replace Obamacare on the same day it is repealed. That is a strategy that Republican leadership does not want to do. So watch for that faction to be potentially problematic for Republican leaders and Donald Trump.
The governing part gets interesting. Julie?
Well, we've been talking about the confirmation of cabinet picks. We learned last week that Donald Trump's team has taken an unusual hard line against allowing the political appointees that President Obama has in place serving as ambassadors around the world to stay even a day after the inauguration. What's also true is that they're finding it somewhat challenging to recruit ambassadors for these positions overall. And so the question is, will they be left without envoys in key places throughout the world? And also, it raises questions about who is Donald Trump going to turn to take some of these important posts in countries that have really vital relationships with the United States.
You probably just created some volunteers out there with that reporting. Jackie?
I mean, some of the Trump nominees might not have their paperwork in, but the Trump team is saying that they're ready for these hearings. They've had 30 practice hearings, 15 the first week of January. They've been subjected to some 2,600 questions, and they've had 70 hours in mock hearings. So while they know these are going to be contentious, but they're making sure that their people are ready for whatever's thrown at them.
Well, we'll be listening for the answers, especially on those big policy questions. Sarah?
Oh, let's just talk about the irony for a second. Donald Trump spent the entirety of President Obama's presidency questioning whether he was born in the United States, which of course many saw as an effort to delegitimize America's first black president. Well, now people close to Donald Trump say they would be surprised if we ever see him fully acknowledge that Russia hacked U.S. political institutions, that they attempted to interfere in the U.S. election. And this is because Donald Trump sees this as one thing, which is an effort to delegitimize his victory. He believes that this is all a political ploy, and he is so competitive that he doesn't want to give an inch on this subject. He doesn't want to even hint that there is any possibility that he could be president because of some sort of outside influence. Now, if he appreciates the irony in this, there is really no indication. I spoke to someone who's close to him, and I sort of compared the two situations, and in terms of the questions about Obama's birthplace, he said, that's all behind us now.
Oh, it's all behind us now. I'll close with both a trivia question and an observation. First, the question. When was the last time the United States had back-to-back-to-back two-term elected presidents? And what's the big difference this time? The last time? The early 1800s, when Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and James Monroe each served 2 terms. It took until 1992 to begin the new streak. Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. One big difference? Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, all from the same party. They called it the Democratic Republicans in those days. And they were all also from Virginia. The more recent streak went Democrat to Republican and back to Democrat, and from Arkansas to Texas to Illinois. Control of the Congress swung back and forth over the most recent streak, too, as Americans seemed to favor stability in the White House, but also divided government. A new all-Republican chapter begins on those steps next Friday. We'll see how long it lasts. Just a reminder, want to understand the new Washington? Tune in tonight, a CNN special town hall. Former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders sits down with Chris Cuomo to answer questions about how Democrats will work with and at times against the Trump administration. It starts at 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on CNN. Thanks for watching. See you back here tomorrow. Wolf Blitzer with us after a quick break.
The man seen in this terrifying video obtained by TMZ pulling a pistol from his waistband and firing toward the crowded baggage claim at Fort Lauderdale's airport is now charged with 3 federal crimes, 2 of which carry a possible death penalty. 5 people were killed in that violent attack on Friday. In court, 26-year-old Esteban Santiago told the judge he was currently unemployed and only has $5 to $10 to his name. He added that he had previously worked as a security officer and served about a decade in the Army. His family telling CNN that his personality had changed dramatically after his last deployment to Iraq. All this as new questions emerge regarding Santiago's mental health and just how he was able to gain access to the weapon used in the deadly airport massacre.
There was no escape. I just began to prayed that my children wouldn't lose their mother.
Police say this 9mm handgun had been confiscated from the shooter in November after he walked into an FBI office in Alaska to tell them he was hearing voices and was being influenced by ISIS. But after a mental health evaluation, he was not deemed mentally defective. The gun was returned.
How is that possible? Well, under existing law, mental illness can only be grounds to take away somebody's weapons if a court has ordered you involuntarily committed to a mental hospital. If you're merely surrendering voluntarily, that does not deprive you of the right to have weapons.
It's a loophole that baffles Santiago's own family.
How are you going to let someone leave a psychological center after 4 days when he is saying that he's hearing voices?
Court documents show Santiago has confessed to planning the attack. Friends and associates noticed more erratic behavior, investigators say, all leading up to Friday, when he fired approximately 10 to 15 rounds, aiming at his victims' heads.
One of the ladies that was killed was my seatmate on the plane. Her husband was shot in the face. The guy next to him was shot in the cheek.
Families of the victims are now providing images of their loved ones killed in the attack, including mothers, fathers, and grandparents. Those left behind, no doubt wondering how things could have been different.
Master Sergeant Deborah Clayton grew up here, and she deeply cared about this community. She was involved in many community engagement efforts and was always the first to step up and volunteer to help kids. She was married and had one son who's in college. Sergeant Clayton was on duty. She was in full police uniform. She was at the Walmart, and she was approached by a citizen who knew Markeith Lloyd and knew that he was wanted for murder. She saw Sergeant Clayton and approached her and said, "Hey, that guy's wanted for murder." Sergeant Clayton immediately called that out over the radio and attempted to locate him. There was a short foot pursuit, and as soon as she said stop, he basically opened fire. Markeith Lloyd needs to turn himself in. Not tonight, not tomorrow. He needs to call and turn himself in now so we can bring this to a peaceful resolution. I believe there have been people out there helping him all along. He's been wanted for several weeks now for a murder. So certainly people continue to help him, and if we find out about those people, we will criminally charge them.
We broadcast to an international audience, and I think that people around the world would be very, very bemused and alarmed to know how much of policy in the United States revolves around abortion. Can you state for the record, Planned Parenthood does or doesn't provide abortions based on money it gets from the federal government?
Well, as you said, Christiane, the federal government in the U.S. does not provide funding for abortion services, hasn't for years. We think that's wrong, but that's the law. And so what we're talking about now, in fact, and what Speaker Ryan said the other day, is now they're going to end access to Planned Parenthood preventive care. That means birth control services, cancer screenings, well woman visits. We provide health care to 2.5 million people every single year, and that health care is now at risk.
Cecile, this is so political, and it's not really about thinking about people's health. Give me an idea. You've just said the issues that will be at risk. How many people, give me the stats of what you're able to achieve with Planned Parenthood.
Well, it's extraordinary. I mean, we've been around 100 years. We're the primary women's health care provider in the United States of America. And frankly, under Obamacare, one of the most popular benefits we fought for was birth control coverage for women. Now, 55 million women get it at no copay. That is at risk. But as a result of the work we've done, we're at a 30-year low for unintended pregnancy in America. And so the crazy thing is, Christiane, about this new effort to end that access to family planning at Planned Parenthood, it is the very thing that is reducing unintended pregnancy and the need for abortion in the United States. It's really a problem when politicians put their politics ahead of women's health care in America. And I can tell you, this is not what voters voted for. This is not even what Trump voters voted for. They are shocked to find out that this administration would consider ending access to Planned Parenthood.
You say that, and I was actually going to ask you because, 52% of white American women did vote for Donald Trump versus 43% for Hillary Clinton. And politics, as you say, is being played with this. What do you think the result will be? What do you think the effect will be on women around the country? In other words, in terms of, will they fight back? What can they do? Is this really going to go through, do you think?
Well, absolutely, women are fighting back, not only women, but men as well. And as you know, there's a big march on Washington, coinciding with the inauguration. What we've seen at Planned Parenthood has been extraordinary. The largest outpouring of support, particularly among young women and men. We've had a 900% increase in women trying to get into Planned Parenthood to get an IUD because they are desperately concerned that they might lose their access to health care. And they know that Planned Parenthood is the place that can provide it. So women in this country are absolutely not going without a fight, and the majority is with us.
Cecile, your mother was the world-famous governor of Texas, and you, apparently, according to your bio, became an activist at the early age of 12 years old. Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader in Congress, has once said that you could have been president if you had run. Are you going to be at this march? How important is this march?
I am going to be at the march. I'm proud to be there. I think that hundreds of thousands of folks will be, and all around the country. But I think, Christiane, what we're talking about is more than a march. I think what's important is that women and men who are concerned about the future of women's rights and women's health in the U.S., that they make their voices heard in whatever way, whether they march or whether they call their member of Congress, call their senators. These are votes that are going to be taken very, very soon. And the access to not only to Planned Parenthood services, but to women's health care is very much at risk. It's incredibly important that the grassroots of America that did not vote for this rise up and make sure that people in Washington hear them.
And do you think that voice will be heard? I mean, let's face it, this kind of assault on Planned Parenthood and the services provided has been going on for years, all the way back to the Reagan administration, and it even affects funding to other countries, the whole Mexico City rule and all the rest of it. How much of an international impact does this politicking with health care have?
Well, of course, we're concerned that any rights that women lose in the U.S. will have a cascading effect around the globe. And it's important, Christiane, abortion has been legal in the United States for more than 40 years. It is accepted law. It is an accepted right. And so it would be obviously enormous. It would be devastating to the women of America to overturn Roe versus Wade, or for women to lose access to basic family planning. I don't think that's where we're going to go, but it's going to take people in this country speaking up and speaking out. And as you said earlier, this is not a partisan issue. The women who come to Planned Parenthood for breast cancer screenings or for family planning services, they're of all political parties, they're of every walk of life. And it's important that the 1 in 5 women in America who've been to Planned Parenthood make sure they speak up right now in Washington.
Cecile Richards, president of Planned Parenthood, thanks for joining us, and you have a real fight on your hands. Thanks
Good to see you.
For being
Thanks.
here.